Queen Zalara stood alone on the highest balcony of the Virex royal palace. The sky above her world was filled with stars, bright and endless, yet she felt as if all light had drained from the universe. The wind moved softly around her long royal cloak, but she did not feel the cold. She did not feel anything at all. Her daughter was gone. Princess Salith, her only child, her future, her heart lost in the darkness of space. 3 cycles ago, news had arrived from the border fleets. A patrol mission near the human frontier had gone wrong. There had been an explosion. Enemy fire, confusion, fire and silence. When the smoke cleared, Salith's royal cruiser was gone. No escape signal. No life signs. Only drifting metal and broken stars. The council had spoken gently, carefully, as if soft words could change truth. There were no survivors. Your Majesty. That sentence echoed in Zalara's mind again and again, like a wound that refused to close. She was a queen. She had ruled worlds. She had commanded fleets that could burn planets. Her name alone could stop rebellions before they began. Yet none of that power could bring back her daughter. Zalara lowered herself slowly to the cold crystal floor of the balcony. Her claws pressed into the stone as her body trembled. Virex queens were not supposed to cry. They were taught strength from birth, control, pride. But that night, Queen Zalara broke. A low broken sound escaped her chest as grief poured out. She remembered Salith as a hatchling, clinging to her robes. She remembered teaching her how to speak before the council, how to stand tall, how to hide fear behind calm eyes. She remembered laughter in the garden halls, shared secrets, quiet moments before sleep. Now those memories were all she had left. Inside the palace, servants and guards stood frozen, pretending not to hear their queen's pain. No one dared approach her. No one knew how the Virex people believed death in space was final. Space did not return what it took. Days turned into weeks. Weeks into cycles. The palace became quieter. The laughter disappeared. The music halls stayed dark. Queen Zalara attended meetings, approved laws, and signed orders, but something inside her had gone silent. Her eyes grew colder, her voice sharper. When advisors spoke of humans, her expression hardened. Humans were emotional, reckless, weak. That was what the Virex had always believed. It was near human space that Salith had vanished. Zalara allowed new restrictions. Stronger borders. Heavier weapons. If the universe had taken her daughter, she would make sure it never took anything else from her again. At night, when no one watched, she returned to Salith's chambers. Everything was exactly as it had been left. Training tools rested against the wall. Star charts floated above the desk. A half-finished message still glowed faintly on the data panel. Zalara reached out and touched the symbols with trembling claws. You should be here, she whispered. Some nights. She dreamed Salith was still alive, calling to her from the stars. Other nights, she dreamed of finding only silence. On the longest night of the Virex year, the queen returned to the balcony once more. The stars shone brightly, uncaring and distant. She lifted her head and spoke to them. Her voice barely more than a breath. Come home, my child. The stars did not answer. Far away, on a small blue world, fate was already moving quietly, gently toward a future no one could have imagined. Princess Salith did not die that day. The cruiser had exploded, throwing her escape pod into the cold black of space. The pod's systems were failing, sparks flying from the control panels. She had no way to steer. She could only hope that the universe had mercy. The pod crashed violently onto a strange blue and green planet, far from Virex space. Trees stretched into the sky. Water flowed in rivers that shimmered under a strange sun. Salith was battered and broken. Her wings, delicate and strong, were shredded from the impact. Her scales were scorched, and her light flickered weakly. She lay there gasping, uncertain if she would survive another moment. When she opened her eyes, expecting emptiness or death, she saw something she had not anticipated. A figure stood over her, a human. He was small, thin, fragile. His eyes were wide, staring at her with fear and curiosity. Seelith's first thought was danger. Humans were unpredictable, and in Varek's history, they were often violent. She had been taught to fight them or avoid them. Instead, the human crouched. He did not raise a weapon. He held out a small kit filled with tools and liquids. I think you're hurt," he said. "I can help, please. Don't move." The voice was soft, unfamiliar, yet strangely kind. Seilith tried to speak, but her throat was dry. She could barely move her limbs. The human worked quickly, cleaning her wounds and binding them. She felt a pain she had never known, not just from injuries, but from fear, uncertainty, and disbelief. Days passed, and Seilith remained hidden in a small, abandoned shelter. The human, whose name she learned was Daniel, brought food and water, spoke gently, and never forced her to do anything she did not want. Seilith observed him from the shadows, confused. Humans were supposed to be weak, but here was one risking his safety to help an alien creature, an alien princess, from a distant empire. When human patrols came near, Daniel whispered instructions, moving Seilith silently behind crates and rocks. When they searched nearby forests, he lied to them, saying she was a small animal or a wild creature. Seilith had never seen such bravery, not from soldiers, not from her own people. Humans did not fight with fire or claws, but with something else: courage, care, and stubbornness. Slowly, painfully, she began to heal. Her wings mended, her scales regained color, and her light returned, flickering brighter each day. She learned to trust Daniel, though she still kept her guard up. In return, he learned her language, and they shared stories in whispers under the strange alien moons. Seilith realized something she had never truly understood before. Humans loved in ways her people rarely did. They risked themselves without expectation. They gave without demand. At night, when the stars were visible in the alien sky, Seilith sometimes thought of her mother, Queen Zalara. Was she crying? Searching? Or had she already hardened her heart, believing her daughter was gone forever? Seilith pressed her claw to her chest, imagining the warmth of her mother's touch. She wanted to return, but the universe had cast her far from her home. Daniel noticed her thoughts. "You miss someone," he said one evening, sitting beside her under the stars. Seilith nodded, unable to speak. He didn't push. He simply reached out, offering a hand. In that small gesture, Seilith felt something she hadn't felt in a long time: hope. Hope. It was fragile, yet it was alive. And so she waited. Not helplessly, but quietly, gathering strength, healing wounds, learning patience. She had survived the impossible once. Perhaps she could survive it again. Perhaps one day she could return to her mother, to her people, to the stars she had always loved. But for now, she remained hidden with the human who had become her guardian, her friend, and perhaps in ways she did not yet understand, her reason to believe that even lost children could find their way home. Far away, the stars continued to shine cold and distant. But somewhere in the vast universe, fate had begun to move quietly, preparing the impossible reunion that would change everything. Back in the Varek's capital, life continued, but it was hollow. Queen Zalara moved through her days like a shadow, her claws clicking on the crystal floors of the palace. She held audiences with generals, diplomats, and merchants, but her mind was elsewhere, lost among memories of Seilith. The Council of Stars, her advisors, tried to persuade her to focus on matters of state. They spoke of fleets, colonies, and expanding borders. Yet Zalara's heart had grown silent. Nothing mattered without her daughter. At first, she had mourned openly. Guards whispered behind her back. Advisors shook their heads at her rare moments of visible weakness. But grief had turned into something colder, anger, determination. The queen hardened herself, vowing that no other loss would touch her. The human frontier, where Salith had vanished, became a place of suspicion and fear. Patrols were increased. Defense fleets were stationed at every jump point. Every human settlement near Varek space was labeled hostile. "Humans are careless," a general reported during a meeting. "They bring chaos to the edges of the Dominion. If we strike first, we can secure our borders." Zalara said nothing. Her jaw tightened. In her private chambers, she stared at Selith's old possessions, the training daggers, the star charts, the unfinished reports of her daughter's education. Each object was a memory, a reminder of what she had lost. Her heart ached. Her lips whispered her daughter's name even when the council spoke. Salith, Salith, Saylyth. The council feared the queen's grief might weaken her. But in reality, it had changed her in unexpected ways. She became sharper, more calculating, more relentless. Decisions that would have required debate now passed with a simple nod. Ministers hesitated before presenting news. Zalara seemed untouchable, a force of the universe itself. But inside, she was still a mother searching for a child in the stars. On certain nights, she walked alone through the gardens of the palace, looking up at the sky. The stars shone with their usual brilliance, yet they felt indifferent, as if mocking her grief. She remembered holding Salith as a hatchling, teaching her to fly across the crystal halls, laughing as the young princess stumbled and fell but always rose again. She remembered nights when Salith would sneak into her chambers to whisper stories or secrets, trusting only her mother with her heart. Those memories were bittersweet. They brought warmth and pain at the same time. The upcoming Human Varek Summit weighed heavily on her mind. Representatives from human worlds were expected to meet with the council. Diplomats and generals demanded she attend. Some saw it as an opportunity to showcase Varek's dominance. Others whispered that humans would attempt deception, perhaps even revenge for past skirmishes. Zalara almost refused. She had no desire to see the species that had indirectly caused her daughter's disappearance. Her heart ached at the thought of facing the people she had always believed were weak and reckless. Yet, deep down something stirred. She could not explain it. A small, impossible hope whispered in her chest. Perhaps, against all odds, Salith was still alive. Perhaps, somewhere in the vast universe, her daughter waited to be found. That thought was fragile and fleeting, but it persisted. It kept her awake at night, staring at the same stars, whispering the same words. The council noticed the subtle change in the queen. There were moments when her sharp gaze softened, moments when she seemed to look beyond the galaxy, searching for something unseen. When advisors asked what she saw, she only whispered, "My daughter." Zalara knew the universe had a cruel sense of timing. It had taken Salith once. She could not allow it to take her again. Every strategy, every border plan, every fleet deployment was shaped by both grief and hope that, if her daughter survived, she would one day return. Meanwhile, far from Varek space, on the small blue world, Salith trained her wings again. She walked through forests with Daniel, the human who had saved her life. She had begun to understand the strength of this strange species. Humans were fragile, yes, but they had a stubborn courage that even the Vareks did not possess. They risked themselves for others. They loved deeply, without hesitation, without calculation. Salith thought of her mother often. She wondered how Queen Zalara endured each day without her. She hoped the queen had not grown too bitter, too hard, too angry. She longed to return, not just as a daughter, but as someone who had learned new truths. Someone who could change the way the galaxy thought of humans. And so, as the Varek's empire planned its next moves and humans unknowingly shaped her daughter's heart, fate began weaving the strands of a future no one could predict. The stars, distant and silent, watched as the threads of grief, courage, and hope intertwined, preparing for the moment when a lost child might return and change everything forever. The Virex capital was quieter than usual that day. The crystal halls gleamed under the artificial suns, yet an uneasy tension hovered in the air. Scouts had detected an unidentified ship entering Virex space, slow, deliberate, and unlike anything they had seen before. Alarm klaxons echoed through the palace, and fleets scrambled to intercept the vessel. Every general prepared for the worst. Every soldier braced for battle. Queen Zalara, seated on her throne, felt a strange chill. She had seen countless fleets and enemies in her long reign. She had crushed rebellions, negotiated treaties, and expanded her empire with precision. But something about this ship made her heart beat faster than it had in years. Something about it whispered of a possibility she dared not voice. The human-built ship docked at the capital's main port, under heavy surveillance. Defense fleets surrounded it, weapons raised, scanning every inch. The council demanded she give an order: attack or detain, but Zalara remained silent. She felt the weight of countless cycles of grief pressing on her shoulders. Every instinct told her to fear humans, yet a flicker of hope tugged at her heart. The ship's doors opened. A single human stepped forward first. Thin, weary, and obviously exhausted, he raised his hands in surrender. His eyes were wide, but there was courage there too, a quiet, stubborn courage that Zalara had never fully understood. She leaned forward, studying him, her claws curling against the throne's armrest. And then she saw her daughter. Princess Salith stepped out behind the human. Her wings were patched, not yet fully healed, but they shone with a soft, resilient light. Her scales bore the marks of battle and survival. She looked older, stronger, changed, yet she was unmistakably Salith, alive, standing before the eyes of the queen, who had thought her lost forever. The chamber erupted in chaos. Guards shouted, generals called orders, and weapons powered up, ready to fire. But Salith's voice cut through the noise, sharp, commanding, and unmistakably royal. Stop! All at once, silence fell. Even the soldiers froze, their weapons trembling in midair. Salith lifted her clawed hands, her eyes locking with her mother's. I am alive, she said, her voice steady, carrying the authority of a queen in training. Because of this human. If you harm him, you harm me. The council stared in disbelief. No one had expected this: an alien princess returning alive, accompanied by a human, speaking with such boldness to the Virex Empire. Some whispered that she had been brainwashed, that this was a trap. But Zalara did not think of traps or deception. Her heart had recognized her daughter before her mind could question it. Zalara rose, her legs weak, trembling under the weight of emotion. She wanted to rush forward, to hold Salith in her arms, but she could not. Protocol, the eyes of the council, the history of Virex, pride, all demanded restraint. Yet, even as she fought the urge, tears pricked her eyes. 3 cycles of loss, of emptiness, of nights staring at cold stars, had led to this impossible moment. The human stepped forward cautiously. He did not speak at first. He only looked at Salith, and then at the queen, standing with a mixture of fear and quiet pride. He had risked everything to return her to her mother. His courage had defied the vastness of space, the laws of empires, and even death itself. Finally, he spoke. I only did what I thought was right, he said softly. His voice carried no arrogance, no expectation, only honesty. I couldn't leave her behind. Zalara's heart wrenched. Every emotion she had buried, grief, anger, longing, rushed to the surface. She took a step forward, but the council murmured, warning of security, of human treachery. She ignored them. She ignored everything but the daughter she had mourned as dead. Salith moved toward her mother, wings trembling but strong. She reached out, and Zalara did not hesitate. The queen embraced her daughter, pressing her face to Salith's scales. feeling warmth, life, and the miraculous reality that she was truly there. For a moment, the galaxy held its breath. Generals lowered weapons. Advisors stared in shock. Even the soldiers paused, unsure how to respond to this impossible reunion. Zalara whispered over and over, words she had thought she would never say aloud again. "My child, you are alive. You are really alive." Salith clung to her mother, the human by her side, a living proof that even across stars and empires, kindness and courage could create miracles. And in that instant, Zalara knew the course of history itself was about to change. The recovery chamber smelled of antiseptic and heated crystal, but to Queen Zalara, it smelled like hope. Her arms still trembled as she held her daughter, feeling the life that had seemed lost forever. Salith's light flickered softly against the chamber walls, and every pulse reminded Zalara that miracles were possible. Even in a galaxy governed by harsh rules and cold logic, Salith looked up at her mother, her eyes bright but weary. "Mother, I'm sorry. I should have returned sooner." You have nothing to apologize for," Zalara whispered. Her voice was thick with emotion. "You survived. That is all that matters." The human, Daniel, stood a few steps away, watching the reunion in silence. His chest rose and fell with each careful breath. He had never imagined that a simple act of kindness, hiding a wounded alien princess, nursing her back to health, could ripple across an empire. Yet here he was, the living proof that one human could change destinies. Zalara's gaze finally turned to him. Her eyes, sharp and intimidating as a blade, softened in a way few had ever seen. "Why?" she asked simply. "Why did you save her?" Daniel swallowed, his hands trembling. "Because she was hurt. Because leaving her behind would have made me less human. I couldn't let her die." Silence filled the chamber. Not even the hum of the life support crystals dared to break it. The council and generals who had crowded the room moments before now watched with wide eyes, unable to reconcile this fragile human's courage with everything they had believed about the species. "Humans are weak," one general muttered, almost to himself. "They are unpredictable. Look at him," Salith interrupted sharply. Her voice rang with authority that made even the most seasoned generals flinch. "He risked everything for me. Every patrol, every danger. He chose to protect me when no one else could. And yet you call him weak?" The words struck like thunder. The council members exchanged uneasy glances. Zalara felt the walls of her palace, and perhaps the walls of her empire, shifting in ways they had never shifted before. Salith continued, her voice softening. "I have seen what humans are. I have lived among them. They are brave, stubborn, and kind in ways we Virex can barely understand. They love without calculation, without fear of cost. And I would not be alive without one of them." Zalara's heart ached and swelled at the same time. She saw, for the first time, the truth her daughter had learned, the truth the Virex Empire had long ignored. Humans were not just fragile creatures. They were beings of unexpected strength, capable of acts no empire, no army, no fleet could predict. The queen rose slowly from the chamber chair, her claws still trembling. She walked toward Daniel. Every step was measured, regal, yet hesitant, because this human had earned her trust, her respect, and something even greater, her gratitude. "You saved my daughter," she said, her voice unsteady but clear. "You risked everything for a life that is not even yours. Why did you do this? Tell me the truth." Daniel met her gaze, unwavering. "Because she was worth saving. Because it was the right thing to do. That's all I know." The queen turned back to Salith, tears threatening to spill again. "Do you see it now?" she whispered to her daughter. "Do you see what the humans are capable of?" Salith nodded, leaning against her mother. "Yes, and I want the galaxy to see it too. I want them to know that bravery comes in many forms, and sometimes the smallest acts make the biggest difference." Zalara straightened, her mind racing with the implications. Generals and advisors had always warned her about humans. They had painted them as weak, unpredictable, and dangerous. But here was proof to the contrary. One human had changed everything: her daughter's fate, her own heart, and perhaps the future of the Virex Empire. The Queen's voice echoed through the chamber, carrying the weight of authority and emotion together. "We have judged this species for too long. We have assumed weakness where there was courage. We have feared what we did not understand. No longer. From this day forward, we will see humans as they truly are." Even the council fell silent. The general's arms lowered. The palace staff held their breath. In that quiet, monumental moment, history shifted. The Empire had begun to learn that the strength of a being could not be measured by claws, wings, or fleets, but by the heart, the choices, and the courage to act when it mattered most. And in that moment, Queen Zalara realized something even more profound than the return of her daughter. She realized that love, courage, and kindness, qualities the Virex often overlooked, could reshape entire galaxies. If only one was brave enough to embrace them. Salith rested her head against her mother's chest, and Daniel stood quietly nearby. In their silence, the truth was clear. Humanity had shown the universe that strength could wear a fragile body, and yet move mountains. The Virex throne room had never felt so heavy, yet so alive. Queen Zalara stood at the center, her daughter Salith by her side, and Daniel, the human who had changed everything, nearby. The council, generals, and diplomats waited tensely. Every eye was on the Queen, expecting orders, punishments, or declarations of war. But Zalara's mind was elsewhere. She had seen courage, sacrifice, and love in ways she had never imagined. And now she had to act. For years, the Virex Empire had judged humans as weak, emotional, and dangerous. The Empire had built walls, enforced laws, and stationed fleets to control them. Yet the truth now stood before Zalara in flesh and light. One human had defied fear and death to save her daughter. One human had proven that strength was not always measured in fleets, weapons, or claws, but in the heart. Zalara lifted her head, her voice carrying across the room with calm authority. "My people," she began, and even the generals quieted, sensing the weight behind her words. "For cycles, we have feared humans. We have judged them. We have built walls and weapons instead of seeking understanding. And in doing so, we have been blind to what matters most: courage, loyalty, and love." A murmur rippled through the council. Some advisors stiffened, resisting what they thought would be weakness. But the Queen continued, her voice strong, filled with emotion that could not be denied. "I have seen it with my own eyes. One human, fragile, small, and alone, returned my daughter to me. Without hesitation, without demand, he risked his life. He acted not for glory, not for reward, but because it was the right thing to do. And in doing so, he has shown us the power we have overlooked for centuries." The room fell into stunned silence. Generals exchanged nervous glances. Diplomats whispered among themselves, but Zalara did not pause. She turned to Daniel, who stood uncertain, humbled, and unworthy of the attention he had never sought. "You have my gratitude," she said softly, stepping closer. "Not as a queen to a subject, not as an emperor to a foreigner, but as a mother whose child you saved. You have changed the fate of my family and my empire. For that, I will protect you. And for that, the Virex will honor humanity as it should have long ago." Daniel blinked, struggling to find words. Salith placed a hand on his shoulder, steady and reassuring. "You are part of our family now," she said, her eyes shining. "And my mother is wise enough to see what I see." Zalara addressed the council again. "Effective immediately, all human settlements within Virex space are to be protected, not attacked. Military restrictions are to be lifted, and trade, cultural exchange, and cooperation shall begin. Any harm to humans will be considered an act against the empire itself. Gasps and whispers spread through the room. Some generals looked ready to argue, but the queen's presence, her grief turned wisdom, and her authority left them powerless. Even centuries of tradition could not oppose the truth she had spoken. Humans were not weak. They were capable of acts that even an empire could not predict. Salith stepped forward. Humans have taught me lessons we never learned in schools or battles. They have shown loyalty, courage, and kindness that surpass fear and strength. This is the future I want, for our people, for the galaxy, and for anyone who has been lost and found. Zalara nodded, tears glistening in her eyes. She looked at her daughter, at Daniel, and then at the council. From this day forth, the Virex Empire will not only rule with strength, but with understanding. We will honor bravery wherever it is found, even in those we once considered weak. In that moment, the walls of the empire seemed to shift. The guards lowered their weapons, the diplomats' whispers softened, and the generals' rigid postures eased. Something new had been born, a recognition that true power was not only in conquest, but in compassion, courage, and the choices one made to protect life. Daniel, who had never sought recognition or reward, felt something he had never felt before: hope. Hope that his small acts of kindness could truly change the world. Salith squeezed his hand, a silent acknowledgement that his courage had saved more than a life, it had saved an empire. Zalara finally turned to the people of her empire, her voice clear and unwavering. Let this day be remembered, not for fear, not for loss, but for the courage to do what is right. The humans have taught us a lesson we will never forget. Let the galaxy remember it too. And so the Virex Empire changed. One human, one lost daughter, and one mother's love had rewritten history, proving that strength is not measured in armies alone, but in the courage to act, the wisdom to see truth, and the heart to protect those we love. Years passed, but the story of that day, the day a human saved a princess and changed an empire, never faded from the stars. Across Virex space, in every colony and on every planet, beings whispered the tale of courage, love, and unexpected strength. Queen Zalara often sat in the high halls of her palace, watching her daughter Salith train young cadets, teach diplomacy, and grow into the leader she had always hoped for. Every movement reminded her of the miraculous journey that had begun far from home. On a blue and green planet full of fragile humans, Salith often laughed as she guided young Virex students, and sometimes her eyes would wander to the stars, remembering nights spent under alien skies with Daniel, the human who had kept her alive when the universe had seemed empty. She had learned many lessons from him: patience, courage, and above all, that strength did not always roar, it sometimes whispered in small acts of bravery. Daniel had become a symbol, not just of kindness, but of a new alliance. Humans were no longer seen as weak, reckless creatures to be feared or dismissed. They were allies, teachers, and friends, beings whose choices could move mountains, whose courage could alter the fate of empires. And Daniel had done it all without seeking recognition. In quiet moments, he would sit in the palace gardens, watching Salith laugh with cadets or seeing Zalara oversee diplomatic meetings, and feel the weight of something extraordinary, that a single human could ripple through a galaxy and change it forever. Queen Zalara often walked beside Daniel and her daughter in those gardens, the strange blue and violet flowers swaying in the artificial breeze. Sometimes she touched her chest, feeling the emptiness that had haunted her for cycles now replaced by warmth and light. "We were blind for so long," she said softly, looking at Daniel. "I judged your people without knowing them. And I was wrong." Daniel smiled, shrugging. "You only had what we all had the chance to see. And you made us see it," Salith added. Her voice was steady and full of pride. "You saved me, and in doing so, you saved an entire empire from its own blindness." Zalara nodded. Her voice trembled slightly, but it carried authority. "The galaxy must.